Getting fired from Maxwell Industries felt like having the ground yanked from beneath my feet. One moment I was sitting at my desk, reviewing chemical formulas for our latest project. The next I was being escorted out by security while Marcus Maxwell, my boss of 5 years, watched with cold satisfaction. "Poor performance," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We need innovators here, Olivia. People who can bring fresh ideas to the table. Not just," he gestured vaguely at my workspace, "maintain the status quo." I stood there, clutching my cardboard box of belongings, feeling the eyes of my former colleagues burning into my back. 5 years of dedication, countless late nights, and breakthrough discoveries, all dismissed with 2 cruel words: poor performance. What Marcus didn't know then was that his decision to fire me would unravel everything he built. Sometimes the universe has a strange way of revealing truth, and in my case, it came in the form of a dusty old box in my grandfather's attic. 2 weeks after my unceremonious dismissal, I found myself helping my mother clean out Grandpa Henry's house. He had passed away 3 years ago, but my grandmother had only recently felt ready to sort through his belongings. As I climbed into the musty attic, memories of my grandfather flooded back: his infectious laugh, the way his eyes sparkled when he talked about his research, and most of all, his unwavering belief in me. "Be careful with those boxes, dear," my grandmother called from below. "Your grandfather kept everything from his research days there." I smiled, remembering how Grandpa Henry would tell me stories about his time as a chemical engineer. He had worked on numerous projects throughout his career, but never achieved the recognition he deserved. "Too honest for his own good," my grandmother would say, a hint of pride mixed with sadness in her voice. As I moved aside some old photo albums, a metal lockbox caught my eye. It was tucked away in the corner, covered in decades of dust. The key was taped to the bottom, along with a note in my grandfather's familiar scrawl: "For the right moment." Inside, I found stacks of notebooks, carefully dated and organized. But what made my heart stop was a familiar symbol on one of the folders, the same symbol I had seen countless times at Maxwell Industries. With trembling hands, I opened the folder and began to read. Page after page of detailed research notes, chemical compositions, and experimental data filled the folders. The dates went back 30 years, but the formulas were exactly what Marcus had presented as his own groundbreaking discovery last year. The very project that had earned him millions in investor funding and countless industry accolades. My mind raced back to all the times Marcus had shut me out of key meetings, the way he had jealously guarded certain aspects of the research. It all made sense now. He hadn't innovated anything, he had stolen my grandfather's life's work. I sat there in the dim attic light, surrounded by dust motes and decades of hidden truth, as fury built inside me. Marcus hadn't fired me because of poor performance. He had fired me because I was getting too close to his secret, too familiar with the research that he had stolen. When I confronted my grandmother with the discovery, tears welled up in her eyes. "Your grandfather suspected someone had stolen his research," she whispered, "but he could never prove it. The company he worked for, Maxwell Sr.'s small startup, they claimed all his work was their property. He fought it for years, but..." She trailed off, her hands trembling slightly. "Maxwell Sr.?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Marcus's father?" She nodded. "They were just getting started then. Henry's research, it was revolutionary, but they forced him out, claimed everything. It broke his heart." I spread the papers across my grandmother's kitchen table. The yellowed pages contained not just research notes, but detailed records of my grandfather's correspondence with the company, his attempts to protect his work, and most importantly, his original patent applications, filed months before Maxwell Sr. had claimed the discoveries as his own. "Does Marcus know?" I asked. "About his father stealing Grandpa's research?" My grandmother's expression hardened. "Oh, he knows. He was just a boy then, but he was there when his father came to our house, threatening legal action if Henry didn't back down." I thought about Marcus's smug face as he announced his breakthrough last year, how he had accepted awards and praise for innovations he had stolen, how he had fired me, probably fearing I might recognize something in the formulas, might make connections he couldn't risk. But he had made one crucial mistake. He didn't know about this lockbox. He didn't know that my grandfather had kept proof, irrefutable evidence that the technology Marcus was about to license for millions belonged to someone else. I checked my phone calendar. The big investor meeting was in 3 days. Marcus had been bragging about it for weeks before my firing, how he was going to license his innovation to major manufacturers, a deal worth over $40 million. "Grandma," I said, carefully placing the documents back in the lockbox. "I need to borrow these for a few days." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Show them who really deserves the credit, dear. Do what your grandfather couldn't." That night, I stayed up late, meticulously scanning every document, every note, every piece of evidence. I organized them chronologically, building an airtight case that proved my grandfather had developed the technology decades ago. Then I made 3 calls. First, to James Morton, a patent lawyer who had been my grandfather's friend. He listened quietly as I explained everything, then said 6 words that made me smile. "I've been waiting for this day." The second call was to Sarah Chen, an investigative reporter who had been sniffing around Maxwell Industries for months, suspecting something wasn't quite right with their sudden technological leap. The third call was to my old mentor at the company, Dr. Marcus Williams. He had retired 2 years ago, but I knew he had his suspicions about Marcus's sudden genius. "Come by tomorrow," he said after I explained. "There's something you need to see." As I finally lay in bed that night, surrounded by copies of my grandfather's research, I felt a strange sense of calm. Marcus thought he had won when he fired me. He thought he had protected his secret. But tomorrow, I would start putting the pieces together. And in 3 days, when he stood in front of those investors, ready to sell his stolen innovation, I would be there, with proof that would destroy everything he had built on lies. I closed my eyes, remembering my grandfather's warm smile, his constant encouragement, his belief in doing what was right even when it was hard. "This is for you, Grandpa," I whispered into the darkness. "Justice is finally coming." The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for beginning my grandfather's vindication. I dressed carefully, not in the casual clothes I'd worn since being fired, but in a sharp charcoal suit that meant business. Today, I would start gathering the ammunition I needed to expose Marcus Maxwell's fraud. Dr. Williams's house was exactly as I remembered it from department parties, a modest suburban home with a meticulously maintained garden. He opened the door before I could knock, his face grave but his eyes bright with purpose. "I've been waiting for someone to figure it out," he said, leading me to his home office. I knew Marcus didn't develop that technology himself. The man barely understands basic chemical engineering principles. He pulled out a thick folder from his desk. "I've been keeping records." For the next 2 hours, we pored over his documentation. Dr. Williams had methodically noted every inconsistency in Marcus's claims, every impossibility in his timeline. "He fired me too," he revealed, when I started asking too many questions about his research methodology. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more. Sarah Chen met me for coffee that afternoon, her reporter's notebook already full of suspicious details about Maxwell Industries' meteoric rise. "The timeline never made sense," she said, tapping her pen thoughtfully. "A small chemical company suddenly developing revolutionary technology, with no previous research trail, no published papers, no patent history in that area." James Morton's office was our final stop. The patent lawyer's eyes gleamed as he examined my grandfather's original documentation. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, placing the papers carefully into his briefcase. "I always knew Henry was the real inventor. Now we can prove it." We worked late into the night, preparing documents, cross-referencing dates, building an ironclad case. When I finally returned home, exhausted but satisfied, I found my grandmother waiting up for me. "I found something else," she said softly, holding out a small leather journal. "Your grandfather's personal diary from that time. He wrote about everything, the research, the theft, what it did to him." She pressed it into my hands, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Make him remember who he really was." The morning of the investor meeting, I arrived at Maxwell Industries an hour early. Security didn't stop me. They hadn't yet updated their systems to remove my access. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The conference room where Marcus would make his presentation was already prepared. Sleek displays showcased the revolutionary technology he had stolen from my grandfather. Presentation folders sat at each place setting, filled with graphs and projections of future profits. Everything looked perfect, polished, professional. I took my seat in the back corner, heart pounding but hands steady. James Morton, my grandfather's old friend and patent lawyer, sat beside me, his briefcase containing 30 years of truth. Sarah Chen, the investigative reporter, positioned herself near the door, notebook ready. Dr. Williams would arrive with the investors. His reputation in the industry had guaranteed him an invitation. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Marcus strode in, followed by a group of well-dressed investors. He looked exactly as I remembered: expensive suit, carefully styled hair, and that same smug smile that he'd worn while firing me. He was so busy greeting potential investors that he didn't notice me at first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth with practiced charm, "today marks a historic moment in chemical engineering. What I'm about to show you will revolutionize the industry." That's when he saw me. For a fraction of a second, his perfect composure cracked. Fear flashed across his face before he forced his smile back into place. "I believe you know my former employee, Olivia Parker," he said smoothly, trying to regain control. "Though I'm afraid she's not authorized to be here." I stood up, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Make them remember who he really was. "Actually, Mr. Maxwell," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I have every right to be here, especially since you're about to license technology that belongs to my family." The room fell silent. Investors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Marcus's face hardened. "Security," he snapped, reaching for his phone. "We have an intruder." "Before you make that call," James Morton stood up, opening his briefcase, "you might want to examine these documents. Original patent applications filed 30 years ago by Henry Parker, complete with chemical compositions that match your breakthrough exactly." Marcus's face went pale as James began distributing copies to the investors. "This is ridiculous," he stammered. "These documents are clearly fabricated." "Are they?" Dr. Williams spoke up from his seat among the investors. "I've been studying your research claims, Marcus. The timeline never added up. The technological leap was too great. But now," he held up my grandfather's papers, "everything makes perfect sense." Sarah Chen stepped forward, her reporter's notebook open. "Mr. Maxwell, would you care to comment on how your father acquired this technology from Henry Parker's lab in 1993, or why Mr. Parker's name was removed from all official documentation?" The investors were muttering now, flipping through pages of evidence. Marcus's carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. "This is absurd," he sputtered, his composure completely gone. "You can't prove anything. The company owns all research conducted." I pulled out my grandfather's personal journal. "Page 127. I said, opening to the marked page. "April 15, 1993. Today Maxwell came to my lab with lawyers. Said everything belongs to the company, but they don't know about the backup documentation I've kept. Proof that this was my work before I ever joined them." Marcus lunged for the journal, but I held it out of reach. "Careful," I said quietly. "You wouldn't want to add theft and assault to your list of crimes." The lead investor, a stern-faced woman, stood up. "Mr. Maxwell, I believe this meeting is over. Our firm will be conducting a thorough investigation into these allegations." One by one, the investors filed out, leaving Marcus standing alone at the front of his pristine conference room, surrounded by the evidence of his family's deception. "You're finished," he hissed, his face contorted with rage. "I'll bury you in lawsuits. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I smiled, thinking of my grandfather's strength, his integrity, his quiet certainty that truth would eventually prevail. "No, Marcus, you're finished. The truth was always going to come out. My grandfather made sure of that." 48 hours later, Maxwell Industries was in chaos. Sarah Chen's expose hit the front page, detailing how Marcus and his father had built their empire on stolen research. The company's stock plummeted. The investors withdrew, lawsuits were filed, and federal investigators began examining decades of patents. A week after the confrontation, I sat in my grandmother's kitchen, watching her read the news coverage. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she traced my grandfather's name in the headline. "He would be so proud of you," she whispered, "not just for exposing the truth, but for how you did it. With dignity, with evidence, with justice rather than vengeance." The doorbell rang. It was James Morton, holding a thick envelope. The patent office wants to formally restore Henry's name to the innovations, he said, smiling. And there's more. The new board of Maxwell Industries, what's left of it, they want to make things right. The settlement they offered was substantial full recognition of my grandfather's work, significant financial compensation, and most importantly, a position for me heading up the newly renamed Parker Laboratories. Marcus, I heard, had fled the country, facing multiple investigations into intellectual property theft. His carefully constructed empire had crumbled, built as it was on lies and stolen dreams. In my new office, my grandfather's old lab, renovated and modernized, I hung two things: his original patent application, finally bearing his name, and a small note I found in his journal. Truth is like one of my chemical compounds, he'd written. It may lie dormant for years, but under the right conditions, it will always come to light. I touched the frame gently, thinking of the man who had taught me about integrity, about patience, about standing up for what's right. Marcus had fired me thinking he was protecting his secret. Instead, he had set in motion the very events that would expose his fraud. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it waits in dusty attics and forgotten lockboxes. But it always finds its way to the light. The company flourishes now, built on honest innovation rather than stolen glory. Every morning when I walk into the building and see Parker Laboratories on the wall, I think of my grandfather, his brilliant mind, his quiet strength, his unwavering belief that right would eventually triumph over wrong. Marcus thought firing me would silence me. Instead, it gave me the freedom to uncover the truth, to reclaim my grandfather's legacy, and to build something new from the ashes of deception. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice, served not cold, but with the warm certainty that truth will always prevail. Last week, a young intern came to me with concerns about some data that didn't quite add up. I listened carefully, remembering how Marcus had dismissed similar concerns. Then I thanked her for her integrity and launched a full investigation, because that's what my grandfather would have done. That's his real legacy, not just the innovations he created, but the values he instilled. In the end, Marcus didn't just lose his company and his reputation. He lost the chance to learn the most valuable lesson my grandfather ever taught me. Success built on lies will always crumble. But truth, like the best chemical compounds, is indestructible. The crystal glasses clinked as my sister Catherine raised her champagne and a mock toast. To Sarah, she smirked, still running that cute little consulting business of hers. At least she's persistent. Laughter rippled around the massive dining table of our family estate. I kept my expression neutral, sipping water from my glass while mentally calculating how many shares of Morton Industries I now own through my shell companies. If they only knew. The Morton family name once meant something in Chicago's business world. Morton Industries, founded by my grandfather, had grown into a $100 million empire spanning real estate, manufacturing, and technology. My father now sat at its head, with my sister Catherine as heir apparent. And me? I was the family disappointment, the daughter who'd walked away from the empire to start my own business. Really, Sarah, my mother sighed, adjusting her pearls. You're 32 now. Don't you think it's time to be serious about your future? Catherine's just been named Executive Vice President of Operations. Catherine preened. At 35, she was everything my parents wanted. Harvard MBA, perfect corporate wardrobe, engaged to the son of another wealthy family. She'd spent her entire life copying our father's tactics, never questioning, never innovating. I am serious about my future, I replied calmly. Summit Consulting is doing well. Summit Consulting, my father scoffed. A one-woman show working out of a shared office space. Meanwhile, your sister is handling $100 million acquisitions. I thought about the secure laptop in my bag, the one showing my company's true portfolio. Summit Consulting was just the tip of the iceberg, the public face of an operation that had quietly grown into something far more significant. How many clients do you even have? Catherine asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Last I heard, you were doing bookkeeping for small businesses. If she only knew that one of my small business clients was actually a holding company I created to buy up shares of Morton Industries. But I just smiled and spread butter on my dinner roll. Enough to keep me busy. The truth was, I'd seen the writing on the wall years ago. Morton Industries, for all its apparent success, was rotting from the inside. My father and sister were so focused on maintaining the appearance of success that they'd missed the fundamental shifts in the market. It started the day I brought my father a detailed analysis of emerging market trends. I was 25, fresh from completing my MBA at Stanford, not Harvard, to my parents' eternal disappointment. The company needs to digitize, I explained, pointing to my carefully prepared charts. Our competitors are already adapting. If we don't change now. Nonsense, my father interrupted. Morton Industries has thrived for 50 years doing things our way. We don't need Silicon Valley ideas here. Catherine, sitting in on the meeting, laughed. Oh, Sarah, always trying to fix what isn't broken. This is why you should have gone to Harvard. They teach proper business there. That night, I made a decision. If they wouldn't listen, I would find another way. I withdrew my trust fund, a relatively modest amount compared to Catherine's, but enough to start, and founded Summit Consulting. But Summit was just a cover. Behind the scenes, I created Apex Holdings, a private investment firm operating through a complex network of shell companies. While appearing to consult for small businesses, I was actually building a web of strategic investments. I hired the best financial analysts, tech experts, and market researchers. We worked in absolute secrecy, using encrypted communications and private servers. No one knew that the mysterious Sadma Carter bidding on Morton Industries shares was actually Sarah Morton herself. My father and Catherine's mismanagement made it almost too easy. They chased flashy acquisitions while neglecting core infrastructure. They borrowed heavily to maintain the appearance of success, using company assets as collateral. Meanwhile, I was quietly buying up their debt through my holding companies. Every time they took out a loan to fund Catherine's latest vanity project, I was there, purchasing the debt instruments through different entities. Tell us about this shared office space of yours. Catherine's fiancé, Bradley, joined in the mockery. Must be exciting, working alongside, what do they call them? Social media influencers. I thought about my real office, the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise, where Apex Holdings managed billions in assets. But I just nodded pleasantly. It's amazing what you can learn from different perspectives. My mother shook her head. I just don't understand, Sarah. You had everything here. A guaranteed executive position, the family name. Maybe some people aren't cut out for real business, Catherine added, smiling sweetly. At least she's not embarrassing us too publicly with her little venture. I excused myself early from dinner, citing client work. As I drove away from the family estate, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from my chief analyst. Morton Industries just lost the Anderson contract. Stock will plummet when markets open tomorrow. Do we proceed with Phase 3? I pulled over and opened my laptop, quickly reviewing the numbers. The Anderson contract had been keeping Morton Industries afloat, masking their growing debt. Without it, the house of cards would finally collapse. Proceed, I typed back. Begin acquiring all available shares when trading opens. Alert our friends at the banks, it's time to call in those loans. Looking back at the brightly lit mansion in my rearview mirror, I thought about Catherine's mocking toast. For 7 years, I played the role of the failing daughter, the family disappointment. I'd smiled through their condescension, quietly building my own empire while theirs crumbled. Tomorrow, everything would change. The mysterious buyer they'd been fearfully whispering about would finally reveal her identity, and I would learn if success truly is the best revenge. Phase 3 was about to begin, and the Mortons were about to discover that their failing daughter had been several steps ahead of them all along. The morning after that family dinner, Morton Industries stock plunged 47% in the first hour of trading. The Anderson contract loss hit the news, and decades of mismanagement finally caught up with them. I watched it unfold from my real office, the penthouse suite of Chicago's newest skyscraper. Miss Carter, my chief analyst, David, entered with urgent updates. Morton Industries is trying to secure emergency funding, but every bank has turned them down. Of course they had. Apex Holdings owned most of their debt. Their board is calling an emergency meeting, David continued. Your father and sister are trying to maintain control, but the shareholders are demanding answers. I smiled, thinking of Catherine's smug face at dinner. Are we ready for the next step? He nodded, sliding a folder across my desk. Everything's in place. Apex Holdings now controls 43% of Morton Industries shares. With the proxies we secured from other shareholders, we have effective control. And they still don't know who's behind Apex? No, they've been too busy trying to save appearances to dig deeper. Though your sister did try to arrange a meeting with SM Carter last week. I couldn't help but laugh. Catherine had sent an email practically begging to meet the mysterious investor who was buying up Morton Industries shares. The same sister who'd mockingly asked if I was still playing at business wanted to negotiate with my alter ego. Send the notice to the board, I instructed. Sam Carter will be attending today's emergency meeting. My phone buzzed. Another frantic message from Catherine. Sarah, where are you? Dad's having a meltdown. The company's falling apart. We need everyone here. I didn't respond. Instead, I changed into my power suit, not the modest outfits I wore to family dinners, but the kind of suit that commanded attention in any boardroom. 7 years of hiding my success was about to end. The Morton Industries boardroom was chaos when I arrived. Board members argued loudly, their faces red with panic. My father sat at the head of the table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Catherine paced nervously, her perfect composure cracking. They barely noticed me enter. Why would they? To them, I was just Sarah, the failure, the consultation who worked from a shared office space. What is she doing here? One board member demanded. This is a private meeting. I took my time walking to the front of the room. Actually, I have every right to be here. In fact, I called this meeting. My father's head snapped up. What are you talking about? I connected my laptop to the projector. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm SM Carter, CEO of Apex Holdings. The room fell silent. Catherine stopped pacing, her face draining of color. That's impossible, she whispered. Sam Carter is a brilliant investor who's been acquiring Morton Industries piece by piece. I smiled. Sarah Morton Carter. Did none of you even think to look into those initials? I pulled up the ownership documents, displaying them on the screen. Apex Holdings, through various subsidiaries, now controls 43% of Morton Industries shares. We also own the majority of the company's debt obligations. My father stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. You're the one who's been buying us out. Someone had to. Your leadership has driven this company to the brink of collapse. The Anderson contract was just the final straw. Catherine found her voice, though it shook with rage. This is ridiculous. She's lying. She runs a small consulting firm. She works in a shared office. Summit Consulting was a cover, I explained calmly. A very successful one, considering none of you ever bothered to look deeper. You were too busy mocking me to notice I was building something far bigger than Morton Industries. I clicked to the next slide, showing Apex Holdings' full portfolio. $12 billion in assets under management, controlling interests in dozens of companies. Strategic partnerships with tech giants and emerging market leaders. While you were clinging to outdated business models, I continued, I was building the future, the digital transformation I proposed 7 years ago. I implemented it in my own company instead. The international partnerships you dismissed as unnecessary, they're now the backbone of Apex's success. The board members whispered among themselves, their earlier hostility replaced by dawning respect. My father had sunk back into his chair, staring at the empire his failing daughter had built. As of this morning, I announce Apex Holdings has enough shareholder proxies to take control of Morton Industries. We'll be restructuring the company, modernizing operations, and implementing the changes that should have been made years ago. You can't do this, Catherine protested weakly. This is our company, our legacy. A legacy you've nearly destroyed through mismanagement and pride. Look at the numbers, Catherine. Really look at them. I pulled up the company's financial statements, highlighting years of declining profits masked by creative accounting and dangerous borrowing. Every time you took out loans to fund vanity projects, Apex was there to buy the debt. Every time you ignored market trends and lost customers to more innovative competitors, we were acquiring your shares at declining prices. You did this to yourselves. The board members were nodding now. They'd seen the company's decline but had been powerless to stop it under my father's authoritarian leadership. There will be changes, I continued. Major ones. The board will be restructured. New management will be brought in. The company will finally enter the 21st century. And what about us? My father asked quietly. I studied him, this man who dismissed my ideas, mocked my ambitions, and chosen Catherine as his heir simply because she never challenged his outdated views. You'll be offered a retirement package, assuming you step down quietly. Catherine, I turned to my sister, who looked like she might faint. You have two choices. Accept a minor position under new management and learn how modern business actually works, or leave with a generous severance. This is revenge, isn't it? She spat. For all the times we made fun of your little business. I shook my head. This is business, Catherine. Something you never really understood. I'm saving the company you nearly destroyed. The fact that it's satisfying to reveal the truth after 7 years of your mockery, that's just a bonus. The meeting lasted another hour. The board voted overwhelmingly to accept Apex's proposal. They had little choice, given our controlling interest. My father signed his resignation with trembling hands. Catherine stormed out, tears streaming down her face. As the boardroom emptied, my mother appeared in the doorway. She'd been so quiet during the meeting, I'd almost forgotten she was there. All this time, she said softly, while we were pitying you. You saw what you wanted to see, I replied. A daughter who rejected the family path must be failing, right? It never occurred to any of you that I might succeed differently. Why did you tell us? I laughed. Would you have believed me? Besides, you made it clear what you thought of my business abilities that day I proposed modernizing the company. Remember what you said. Leave the real business to your sister. She flinched. We were wrong. Yes, you were. About everything. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. Morton Industries underwent a complete transformation. I brought in top talent from Apex to modernize operations, implement digital solutions, and rebuild client relationships. Catherine, surprisingly, chose to stay. Perhaps getting knocked off her pedestal taught her something. She started in middle management, finally learning the business skills she should have developed years ago. My father took the retirement package but couldn't stay away. 1 month after the takeover, he appeared in my office, my real office, not the shared space he so often mocked. I don't know whether to be proud or furious, he admitted, looking around at the view of Chicago's skyline. Try being both, I suggested. I learned a lot from you, Dad. Mostly what not to do, but still. He managed a weak smile. The company, it's doing better than it has in years. Amazing what can happen when you actually adapt to changing markets instead of clinging to the past. And all those nights we thought you were working late at your failing consulting firm. I was working late, I corrected, building something bigger than you ever imagined I could. He shifted uncomfortably. Your sister is struggling with the changes. Catherine's problem was never lack of ability, I said. It was too much entitlement. Maybe now she'll learn the value of earning success instead of expecting it. And what about me? He asked quietly. Is there a place for me in this new version of our family company? I studied him thoughtfully. That depends. Are you ready to learn from your daughter? To admit that sometimes the old ways aren't the best ways? He nodded slowly. I think 7 years of being proven wrong has taught me some humility. Then yes, I said. There's a place for you on our advisory board. Part-time, of course. You should enjoy that retirement package. As he left, I thought about that dinner just weeks ago. Their mocking toasts, their condescending concerns, their absolute certainty that success only looked one way. The next family dinner was different. It was held in my penthouse with a view of the city we were helping reshape. Catherine was quieter, more thoughtful. My father actually listened when I spoke about business. My mother still didn't quite understand what I'd built, but she was trying. To Sarah, Catherine raised her glass, no mockery in her voice this time. Who taught us all that success doesn't always look the way we expect it to? I smiled, thinking of the scared but determined young woman who'd walked away from a guaranteed future to build something of her own. To new beginnings, I replied, and to finally seeing people for who they are, not who we assume them to be. Later that night, standing in my office, I opened a frame hanging on the wall. Inside was the analysis I presented 7 years ago, the one they dismissed so completely. Next to it was Apex Holdings' current valuation, $12 billion and growing. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in the reveal, but in all the quiet moments of building something extraordinary while others underestimate you. Catherine still works at Morton Industries, slowly earning the respect she once took for granted. My father's advisory role has helped him find purpose in retirement. And me, I'm expanding Apex's reach globally, proving that the best revenge isn't just success. It's success so profound it transforms even those who doubted you. As for that shared office space they mocked so often, I bought the building. It's now a startup incubator, helping other underestimated entrepreneurs build their own empires. Because sometimes the greatest satisfaction isn't in proving people wrong. It's in helping others prove themselves right. The expensive Italian leather of my sister Madeleine's heels clicked against the marble floor as she strode through the lobby of Blackwood Tower. Even from behind my cleaning cart, I could smell her designer perfume, the same one she bragged about costing more than my monthly salary. "Oh look, it's our little Sophie," she called out, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. Still keeping our building clean. I gripped my mop tighter, forcing a polite smile. "Good morning, Madeleine." She wasn't alone. My brother Edward, freshly promoted to senior vice president at the family's investment firm, stood beside her in his tailored suit. He barely glanced in my direction, too busy tapping away on his phone. "You missed a spot," Madeleine pointed to an imaginary stain on the floor, laughing at her own joke. "But I suppose attention to detail isn't your strong suit. That's why you're down here while we're up in the executive suites. If only they knew. If only they had any idea that the building they were so proud of working in, the prestigious Blackwood Tower with its marble floors and panoramic city views, belonged to me. Every square foot of it, from the underground parking garage to the helipad on the roof. But that was my secret, for now. I watched them disappear into the express elevator, the same one I used after hours when no one was around to see me enter the hidden penthouse office where I ran my real estate empire. To them, I was just Sophie the janitor, the family disappointment, the cautionary tale they loved to mock at every gathering. Poor Sophie, they'd say, voices heavy with fake sympathy. If only she'd applied herself like Madeleine and Edward. What they didn't know was that while they were climbing the corporate ladder at our father's company, I was quietly building something of my own. It started 10 years ago, when I was fresh out of college with a business degree nobody in my family thought I deserved. "Business school is wasted on you," my father had declared at my graduation dinner. "You lack the killer instinct, the drive. Look at your siblings, they understand what it takes to succeed." That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight for a place at the family company. I wouldn't beg for their approval or try to prove my worth. Instead, I built something they'd never see coming. I took the small inheritance my grandfather had left me, the only person who ever believed in me, and bought my first property. It was a run-down apartment building in a forgotten part of town. Everyone said I was crazy, that I was throwing away good money on a lost cause. But I saw potential where others saw decay. I lived in the basement, learned everything about property management hands-on. I fixed toilets, painted walls, dealt with difficult tenants. Within a year, I had transformed that building from a neighborhood eyesore into a desirable address. I took the profits and bought another property, then another. Each time living in the basement, working as the janitor, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. My family thought I was just bouncing between menial jobs, too proud to admit defeat and come crawling back to father for help. "At least she's working," they'd say at family dinners. Even if it's just cleaning. What they didn't know was that I was building a real estate portfolio worth hundreds of millions. Each property carefully hidden behind layers of shell companies and trusts. All leading back to Phoenix Holdings, my company, named after the bird that rises from the ashes. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Blackwood Tower, the most prestigious office building in the city, was quietly put up for sale. The same building where my family's company occupied 3 full floors, where my father held court like a king in his corner office. The asking price was astronomical, $300 million. My family's company tried to buy it, of course. My father saw it as the ultimate status symbol. But they were outbid by an anonymous buyer, Phoenix Holdings. I watched from the shadows as they raged about losing the building to some mysterious foreign investor. Then I arranged to have the building's maintenance contract awarded to a new company, one that would hire me as a janitor. "Oh honey," my mother had said when she heard about my new job. "At least you'll be close to the family now. Maybe you'll finally see what real success looks like." That was 2 years ago. For 2 years, I've played my part perfectly. The quiet janitor who keeps her head down, who endures their casual cruelty with a smile. The family failure who doesn't even have an office, let alone a corner one with a view. My father barely acknowledges me when he passes through the lobby. My mother pretends not to see me when she comes to take Madeline to lunch. My siblings treat me like their personal servant, leaving extra mess for me to clean up just because they can. Sophie, Edward's voice snapped me back to the present. He was storming across the lobby, waving a piece of paper. What is this? I recognized the letter in his hand, the same one I had delivered to every tenant in the building that morning. The rent increase notice? Increase? This is highway robbery. They're tripling the rent. Don't they know who we are? I kept my face carefully neutral. I just cleaned the floors, Edward. I don't know anything about the business side. He crumpled the paper and threw it at my feet. Well, clean that up too then. And tell your supervisor we need to speak to the building owner immediately. This is unacceptable. I bent to pick up the paper, hiding my smile. I'll pass along the message. All around the lobby, other tenants were having similar reactions. Phones were ringing, voices were rising in anger and disbelief. My sister's heels clicked back across the marble as she rejoined Edward. Daddy's furious, she announced. He's called an emergency board meeting. We need to find out who owns this building and make them understand they can't treat us this way. I pushed my cleaning cart toward the supply closet, listening to them plot and scheme. They had no idea that the meeting they were demanding was about to change everything. No idea that their perfect world was about to be turned upside down. In my hidden penthouse office, I took off my janitor's uniform and changed into a perfectly tailored suit that cost more than Madeline's entire wardrobe. I opened my laptop and checked the building's security cameras, watching my family gather in their conference room. My father stood at the head of the table, his face red with rage as he paced back and forth. Edward was frantically making calls, trying to leverage his business contacts. Madeline was typing away on her phone, probably updating her social media about the terrible injustice being done to them. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for their office. Mr. Harrison, I said when my father's secretary answered. Please inform the Harrison family that the owner of Blackwood Tower will meet with them in 1 hour. Conference room A, top floor. Then I sat back in my chair, watching them react to the news on my security feed. Their relief was palpable. They thought they were about to solve everything with their usual mix of intimidation and family connections. They had no idea what was coming. The antique clock on my wall ticked steadily toward the moment of revelation. In less than an hour, I would walk into that conference room not as Sophie the janitor, but as Sophie Harrison, owner of Phoenix Holdings and their new landlord. For 10 years, I had waited for this moment. Through every snide comment, every dismissive glance, every humiliation, I had held onto this dream. Now it was finally time to show them who the real failure was. I stood up and straightened my suit, checking my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The woman who looked back at me wasn't the meek janitor they were used to seeing. She was powerful, confident, unstoppable. Ready or not, I whispered to my reflection, it's time for the real Sophie Harrison to step into the light. Conference room A was the crown jewel of Blackwood Tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the massive mahogany table could seat 50 executives comfortably. I cleaned this room hundreds of times, always imagining this moment. Through the security feed on my phone, I watched my family file in. My father took his usual position at the head of the table, his preferred power move when intimidating business associates. Madeline and Edward flanked him like loyal lieutenants, while my mother sat nearby, already practicing her most charming smile. I waited until they were all settled, until the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then I stepped into the private elevator that would take me from my penthouse office to the conference room floor. As the elevator descended, I thought about all the moments that had led to this. The Christmas dinners where they'd relegated me to the kids' table, even in my 30s, because I was just a janitor. The family photos where they'd positioned me in the back, ashamed of my uniform. The countless times they'd walked past me in the lobby without so much as a nod. The elevator doors opened silently. I squared my shoulders and walked down the hallway, my own designer heels clicking against the marble floor. Though unlike Madeline's, mine weren't bought with Daddy's money. Through the glass walls, I could see them all looking expectantly at the main entrance, where they assumed the mysterious owner would arrive. None of them noticed me entering through the side door. They'd grown so used to ignoring my presence that it was almost automatic. I walked to the head of the table, opposite my father. For a moment, nobody moved. I saw the exact instant recognition hit them, followed immediately by confusion. They were seeing Sophie, yes, but not the Sophie they knew. This Sophie wore a tailored Chanel suit and carried a Hermes briefcase that cost more than their monthly salary. "What is this?" my father demanded, his face flushing red. "What are you doing here? Get back to work." I smiled, placing my briefcase on the table with a soft thud. "I am at work, father. In fact, I own this work." The silence that followed was deafening. Madeline's perfectly painted mouth fell open. Edward's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table. My mother's practiced smile froze in place. "What are you talking about?" my father growled, though I could see the first flicker of fear in his eyes. I opened my briefcase and began laying out documents. "Phoenix Holdings," I said calmly. "The company that purchased this building 2 years ago is mine. I founded it 10 years ago, right after the graduation dinner where you told me I lacked the killer instinct." "Impossible," Edward sputtered. "Phoenix Holdings is worth billions. 4.2 billion to be exact," I corrected him. "Though this building is just a small part of the portfolio." Madeline grabbed the nearest document, her hands shaking. "This can't be real. You're a janitor?" "No," I said softly. "I chose to work as a janitor." "There's a difference. I wanted to understand every aspect of my properties from the ground up. While you were bragging about corner offices, I was learning how buildings really work." My father stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "This is some kind of trick, some kind of joke." "The only joke," I cut him off, "was watching you all strut around my building like you owned it. Watching you treat me like dirt while standing on marble floors I paid for." I pulled out the final document, the new lease agreement. "Now, about that rent increase. You can't do this," my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We're family." "Family?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Was I family when you made me use the service entrance at Madeline's wedding? Was I family when you told your friends I was just going through a phase of manual labor? Was I family when you all took bets on how long it would take me to come begging for a real job?" No one spoke. Outside the windows, the city stretched endlessly below us, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this room. "The rent increase stands," I continued, my voice steady. "Triple the current rate, effective in 30 days. Of course, you're welcome to relocate your company if you find the terms unacceptable." Edward leaned forward, his business instincts kicking in. "Come on, Sophie, we can negotiate. Maybe if you sell us the building." "Not for sale," I cut him off. "Not now, not ever." "You'll regret this," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea the connections I have, the pressure I can bring to bear." I held up my hand, silencing him. "Actually, father, I do know. I know exactly what strings you can pull, what favors you can call in. Did you think I spent the last decade doing nothing but pushing a mop?" I pulled up an email on my phone and turned it to face them. "This is from Gerald Matthews. You remember him? Your old golf buddy who sits on the board of First National Bank?" The table fell quiet. In my entire life, I had never heard him admit he was wrong about anything. "You didn't lack the killer instinct," he continued. "You just had a different way of showing it." I met his eyes across the table. "I learned from watching you, father. You taught me that business is business. That's what you always said, isn't it?" He nodded slowly, a glimmer of something like respect crossing his face. "So what now?" "Bean managing my personal accounts for the past 5 years. Never mentioned it to you, did he?" My father's face went pale. I continued, "And Thomas Wellington at Sterling Investments. He's been begging to handle Phoenix Holdings' portfolio since we outperformed his top clients 3 years running." Should I go on? The room fell silent again. But this time it was a different kind of silence. The kind that comes when people finally realize they've lost all their power. "Why?" Madeline whispered. "Why pretend to be a janitor? Why let us treat you like that if you had?" "Because I wanted you to show me who you really were," I replied. "And you did. Every single day, you showed me exactly who you were when you thought I had nothing." I stood up, gathering my documents. "The new lease terms are non-negotiable. You have 30 days to either accept them or vacate the premises. And yes, before you ask, the same increase applies to all tenants. I'm not discriminating against family." My father, for the first time in my life, looked small. "Sophie, please. This building, this location, it's part of our company's identity. Then I suppose you'll have to decide how much that identity is worth to you. I said, turning to leave. Oh, and one more thing. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my janitor's uniform, laying it carefully on the table. I quit. The next few weeks were chaos. My family tried everything: legal threats, emotional manipulation, even attempting to rally other tenants against me. But I had spent 10 years preparing for this moment. Every document was ironclad, every business decision defensible. Most of the building's tenants grumbled but ultimately accepted the increase. Blackwood Tower's prestige was worth the premium, and my reputation as a fair but firm landlord was well established in the real estate world. My family's company was the last to submit their decision. On day 29, their signed lease arrived on my desk, complete with my father's signature at the bottom. That evening, as I stood in my penthouse office watching the sunset paint the city gold, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Family dinner on Sunday. Please come, we need to talk." I thought about ignoring it, about maintaining the wall I built between us. But something made me respond. "I'll be there." That Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house driving my new Bentley, not to show off, but to remind them that I wasn't the same person they could push around anymore. The dinner was awkward, tense with unspoken words. Gone were the snide remarks about my job, the condescending advice about real careers. Instead, they tried too hard, complimenting my success, asking about my business, attempting to rewrite history. "We always knew you had potential," my mother said, passing the salad. "We just worried about you." "No," I corrected her gently. "You were embarrassed by me. There's a difference." "Can you blame us?" Madeline burst out. "You were working as a janitor." "I wasn't working as a janitor," I said. "I was learning. While you were all taking shortcuts to success through father's connections, I was building something real, something of my own. And now you're punishing us for it," Edward muttered. I set down my fork. "No, I'm treating you exactly the same way I treat all my tenants. The difference is you're not used to being treated like everyone else." My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "I was wrong about you." "Now?" I smiled. "Now we have a strictly professional relationship. You're my tenants, I'm your landlord. Nothing more, nothing less." "But we're family," my mother protested. "Family," I said, standing up, "doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't need a billion-dollar revelation to show basic respect." I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "You can keep your family dinners and your country club memberships and your social circles. I have something better. I have self-respect." The next morning, I stood in the lobby of Blackwood Tower, watching the morning rush of tenants streaming through the doors. A new maintenance crew was at work, their uniforms bearing the Phoenix Holdings logo. Madeline and Edward walked past, no longer strutting, no longer acting like they owned the place. They nodded politely, not warmly, but with the formal respect one shows to someone with power. My father followed a few minutes later. He paused when he saw me, looking like he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just gave me a slight bow and continued to the elevator. I smiled, thinking of the scared little girl who used to desperately seek his approval. She was gone now, replaced by a woman who had built an empire from the ground up, literally. As I took the private elevator to my penthouse office, I thought about my grandfather, the only one who had believed in me. "Don't let them define you, Sophie," he used to say. "Build your own path." I had done more than that. I had built my own kingdom, brick by brick, floor by floor. And I had done it my way, starting from the bottom, learning every detail, understanding every aspect of my business. The view from my office still took my breath away. The city stretched out before me, filled with buildings owned by Phoenix Holdings, each one a testament to what can be achieved when you refuse to let others write your story. On my desk, next to the latest acquisition proposals and development plans, sat my old janitor's badge. I kept it as a reminder, not of humiliation, but of triumph. Because sometimes the person holding the mop knows more about the building than the people in the corner offices. And sometimes the best revenge isn't making others feel small. It's growing so big that they can't help but see how small they made themselves. The email landed in my inbox at exactly 3:17 a.m. Access denied. Administrator privileges revoked. I smiled, imagining Amanda's face when she tried to log into our company's systems in a few hours. My sister never did understand that running a tech company required more than just owning shares. My name is Megan Chen, and I was about to teach my sister that true power isn't found in legal documents, it's built in lines of code. Did you do it? Nathan's text came through moments later. My CTO had been waiting for this signal for months, ever since we discovered Amanda's scheme. It's done, I replied. How long until she notices? Based on her usual login time? About 4 hours. Want me to record her reaction? I hesitated, then typed, no, I want to see it myself. 3 months ago, I would have avoided any confrontation with Amanda. We'd founded Codecraft Solutions together 5 years ago, turning my programming skills and her business degree into a $50 million company. But that was before I discovered the fake contract, before I learned how thoroughly my own sister had betrayed me. The signs had been there, looking back. Amanda's increasing secrecy about our finances, the way she brushed me to sign paperwork during our mother's funeral, claiming it was just routine updates while I was grieving. Her subtle manipulation, playing on our childhood dynamics where she was always the strong one, the smart one, while I was just the quiet geek who was good with computers. I got up from my desk, walking to the window of my home office. The city was still dark, but dawn wasn't far off. Soon, Amanda would arrive at Codecraft's headquarters, confident in her victory, only to find herself locked out of everything. My phone buzzed, a text from Claire, our head of HR. Security team is briefed. We're ready. Everything was in place. While Amanda had been busy with her legal maneuvering, I'd been preparing. She thought owning the company meant controlling it. She was about to learn the difference. At 7:30 a.m., I walked into Codecraft's office, nodding to the security team. They'd already been briefed about the potential situation. Our employees were arriving, settling into their workstations, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Morning, Megan, called Tony from engineering. Did you see the error reports from last night's test build? Already fixed, I replied, managing a smile. This was why I loved our company. The actual work, the problem solving, the team that had become like family. Everything Amanda saw as just numbers on a spreadsheet. At 7:45, right on schedule, Amanda strutted through the front doors. My sister had always been the picture of corporate success, designer suits, perfect hair, the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your own superiority. Today, she'd outdone herself, probably planning to celebrate her takeover. Good morning, little sister, she called out, her heels clicking across the lobby. I trust you've had time to process everything. I kept my voice neutral. Of course. Would you like to go over the transition plan in your office? She smiled that condescending smile I'd known since childhood. My office? Oh, you mean the CEO's office. Yes, let's do that. I followed her to the elevator, watching as she punched in her code. Nothing happened. That's strange, she muttered, trying again. Still nothing. Problem? I asked innocently. She shot me an irritated look. Technical glitch. I'm sure you can fix it. That's all you've ever been good at, right? The technical stuff? Right, I agreed, entering my own code. The elevator hummed to life. Just the technical stuff. Amanda's first hint at something was seriously wrong came when her desktop computer failed to recognize her login. The second came when her phone lost access to the company email server. What's going on? She demanded, jabbing at her keyboard. Why isn't anything working? I sat down across from her, feeling strangely calm. Did you really think I wouldn't have backups? It'll suffice that I just hand over everything we built because you tricked me into signing some papers. Her face flushed. Those papers are legally binding, Megan. I own Codecraft now. You signed over your shares, your position, everything. You own shares in a company, I corrected her. But this company runs on code, my code. And while you were busy with your legal tricks, I was busy too. I pulled out my tablet, showing her the system logs. Every piece of proprietary software we developed, every client interface, every bit of infrastructure, it all requires administrative access. Access that, as of 3 hours ago, only I have. She stood up so quickly her chair rolled back and hit the wall. You can't do this. I'll sue you. For what? I asked calmly. For maintaining security protocols. For protecting company assets. Everything I've done is documented, justified, and most importantly, legal. I'll hire other programmers. She threatened. They can rebuild everything. I actually laughed at that. Really? You think you can just recreate 5 years of development? Our entire code base is locked down. Even if you could find programmers capable of rebuilding it, how long would that take? How many clients would you lose in the meantime? The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. Amanda slowly sank back into her chair. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "A new agreement," I said, pulling out a folder. "One that reflects the real value each of us brings to this company. You're good at business, Amanda. I've never denied that. But I'm not just the quiet little sister anymore." Her hands were shaking slightly as she took the folder. "You planned this? All of it?" "I learned from the best," I replied. "You taught me that family doesn't mean anything in business, remember? When you used Mom's funeral to push through your fake contract." She had the grace to look ashamed, at least for a moment. I shouldn't have." "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't have. Now, should we discuss the new terms, or would you like to try explaining to our clients why none of their systems are working?" Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. "Board members are arriving early. They want to know what's going on with the system access issues." Perfect timing. "Looks like we'll have an audience for this discussion," I told Amanda, ready to face the board and explain your brilliant takeover plan. For the first time since we were kids, I saw real fear in my sister's eyes. The game had changed, and she knew it. The boardroom was already full when Amanda and I arrived. 8 pairs of eyes watched us take our seats, everyone aware that something significant was happening but unsure exactly what. "Would someone like to explain why our entire system is running on limited access?" Richard Barnes, our lead investor, asked. His tone was calm, but I could hear the underlying tension. Amanda opened her mouth to speak, but I beat her to it. "Actually, yes," I said, pulling out copies of both contracts. Amanda's fraudulent one and my new proposal. "We're dealing with a security protocol I implemented after discovering an attempt to take over the company through questionable means." I distributed the documents, watching faces change as board members began reading. Amanda sat rigid beside me, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrest of her chair. "This first contract," I continued, "was presented to me during our mother's funeral, described as routine paperwork. As you can see, it actually transferred complete control of Codecraft to Amanda, effectively removing me from the company I helped build." "Is this true?" Richard turned to Amanda, his expression darkening. "It's more complicated than that," she started, but fell silent as I pulled up the security footage on the boardroom screen. There she was, caught on camera, rushing me to sign papers while I was clearly distraught, barely looking at what was put in front of me. The timestamp showed it was less than an hour after Mom's service. "Ms. Chen," Richard's voice was ice cold now, "do you have any idea how many regulations this violates?" Before Amanda could respond, I brought up another screen, our company metrics from the past 5 years. "Codecraft's success isn't just about business strategies," I explained. "Our proprietary software, which I developed, is what sets us apart. Every major client we have depends on systems I created. Systems that require continuous maintenance and updates by me and my team." Nathan chose that moment to enter, right on cue. "Megan, we've got clients calling. They want to know why their access is restricted to basic functions only." "What exactly have you done?" Richard asked, leaning forward. "Protected our company's assets," I replied. "Every bit of code I've written includes fail-safes. If unauthorized changes are made to company structure or leadership, the systems automatically enter protected mode. It's all documented in our security protocols." I pulled up another document, the security measures I'd implemented months ago, all properly filed and approved. "This isn't just about ownership," I continued. "It's about understanding what makes Codecraft valuable." Amanda sees numbers on a spreadsheet. I see the actual technology that keeps us competitive. The board members exchanged glances. They were business people, but they weren't stupid. They understood that a tech company without its tech was just an empty shell. "What are you proposing?" Richard asked. I handed out copies of my new agreement, a restructuring that reflects reality. Amanda keeps her business development role. She's good at it when she's not trying to take over the company. I maintain control of our technical operations and intellectual property. Equal ownership, divided responsibilities. "And if I refuse?" Amanda's voice was barely controlled. "Then I walk away," I said simply. "Take my team with me. Start fresh." How long do you think Codecraft would last with no access to its core technology? The room was silent as everyone processed this. Amanda's face went through a range of emotions. Anger, fear, finally settling on resignation. "The board needs to discuss this privately," Richard announced. "Ms. Chen, both of you, please wait outside." In the hallway, Amanda paced while I sat quietly, checking messages from my team. Client calls were piling up, each one a reminder of how dependent the company was on systems only I could fully access. "You've changed," Amanda said suddenly, stopping her pacing. "The Megan I knew would never have done this." "The Megan you knew trusted her sister," I replied, not looking up from my phone. "She learned better." "I was trying to protect the company," she argued, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, you were trying to control it. There's a difference." Before she could respond, the boardroom door opened. Richard's assistant beckoned us back in. The next hour was intense. The board had questions about everything: the technical systems, the client relationships, the proposed new structure. I answered each one calmly, demonstrating exactly why I'd become indispensable to Codecraft's success. Amanda sat silently through most of it, her perfect corporate facade cracking bit by bit as she realized how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered her. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. "We've reached a decision. The board approves the new arrangement, with some minor adjustments." He slid a revised contract across the table. "I suggest you both review this carefully." Very carefully. I read through the document, noting the changes. They were fair, even adding some protections I hadn't thought of. Amanda read her copy more slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "If we both sign this," she said finally, "what happens to the systems?" "They go back to normal," I replied. "After a thorough security audit, of course." She picked up a pen, then hesitated. "Megan, Don't," I cut her off. "Just sign. We can talk about everything else later." One by one, we signed where indicated. With each signature, I felt the weight of the past few months lifting. This wasn't a complete victory. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But it was a start. As the board members filed out, Richard paused by my chair. "Well played," he said quietly. "Your mother would be proud." I watched him leave, those words hitting harder than I expected. Would Mom be proud of either of us? Amanda was still sitting there, staring at the signed contracts. "What now?" she asked, sounding more like my sister than my business rival for the first time in months. I stood up, gathering my things. "Now we do our jobs, separately but equally. And maybe we work on being sisters again. Eventually." She nodded slowly. "I really am sorry, Megan. I got caught up in..." "I know," I said. "But trust takes longer to rebuild than it does to break. Remember that next time you're tempted to play power games." The next 3 months were a lesson in careful balance. Amanda and I established clear boundaries. She handled external business relationships and growth strategy, while I managed our technical operations and development. We communicated through official channels, kept meetings strictly professional, and slowly began rebuilding Codecraft into something stronger than before. It wasn't easy. Years of sisterly competition didn't disappear overnight, and there were moments when old tensions threatened to surface. But we had something now that we never had before: respect for each other's true capabilities. One evening, as I was reviewing code for our newest project, Amanda appeared in my office doorway. She looked different, less polished, more human somehow. "Got a minute?" she asked, hovering uncertainly at the threshold. I gestured to a chair, saving my work. "What's up?" "The Wilson contract," she began, setting a folder on my desk. "They want to triple their service package, but it would require significant system modifications." I opened the folder, scanning the requirements. "This is big. Like, rewrite half our core systems big." "I know," she said. "That's why I wanted to discuss it with you first. The old me would have just promised them everything and expected you to make it work." The admission surprised me. "And the new you?" "The new me recognizes that I don't fully understand the technical implications. I need your expertise to make this decision." I leaned back, studying my sister. The Amanda of 6 months ago would never have admitted to needing anyone's help. "It's doable," I said finally, "but we'd need to expand the development team, maybe bring in some specialized talent. Timeline would be tight." She nodded, taking notes. "Budget? 7 figures, minimum. Plus we need to pause some other projects." "Okay," she said, standing. "I'll tell them we need a week to prepare a proper proposal." Both of us will present it together. As she reached the door, she paused. Hey Megan, Mom's birthday is next week. I was thinking maybe we could visit her grave together. The question caught me off guard. We hadn't visited Mom's grave together since the funeral, since the day Amanda had betrayed my trust. I'll think about it, I said carefully. She nodded, understanding this was neither a yes nor a no, and left. The next week was intense. Amanda and I worked late into the nights, combining her business strategy with my technical knowledge to create a proposal that could reshape Codecraft's future. It was the first time we truly collaborated as equals, each bringing our strengths to the table. Nathan watched us with amusement. Never thought I'd see this, he commented one evening, as Amanda and I argued productively over system architecture diagrams. See what? I asked. You two actually working together instead of competing. It's like watching matter and antimatter learn to coexist. He had a point. Something had shifted between us. The power struggle was over, replaced by something more balanced, more mature. The day of Mom's birthday dawned clear and crisp. I found Amanda waiting by my car in the office parking lot, holding 2 bouquets of white lilies, Mom's favorite. You don't have to come, she said quietly. I know, I replied, unlocking the doors. Get in. The drive to the cemetery was silent. As we walked to Mom's grave, memories flooded back, both good and bad. The sister who had protected me from bullies in school. The businesswoman who had tried to take everything from me. I miss her, Amanda said suddenly, kneeling to arrange the flowers. She would have known how to handle all of this better. Would she? I asked, thinking of our mother's own struggles with family and business. Or would she have just wanted us to figure it out ourselves? Amanda smiled slightly. Probably both. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. You know, she always said you were the smart one. I was so jealous of that. What? You were the golden child. The perfect daughter. Perfect at following rules maybe, but you created things. Built things. I just played the game everyone expected me to play. We stood there in silence, letting those truths sink in. The Wilson presentation is tomorrow, I said finally. Ready? She nodded. Think we can pull this off? Together? Yeah, I think we can. The next morning, we faced the Wilson team as a united front. Amanda handled the business strategy while I explained the technical innovations we proposed. When questions came up, we tag-teamed the responses, each deferring to the other's expertise. We landed the contract, the biggest in Codecraft's history. Celebrating in my office later, Amanda raised her coffee cup in a toast. To the Chen sisters? To doing things right, I corrected, but I was smiling as I clinked my cup against hers. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed photo. Amanda and me as kids, sitting at our first computer, both of us grinning at the screen. The note attached read, "Found this in Mom's things. Thought you should have it." I placed the photo next to my monitors, a reminder of where we'd started and how far we'd come. 6 months after the attempted takeover, Codecraft had grown beyond our original projections. Our new dual leadership structure had become a model for other tech companies. Amanda and I had found our rhythm, each excelling in our domains while respecting the others. Think Mom would be proud? Amanda asked one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports. I looked at the photo on my desk, then at my sister, not my rival anymore, but my true partner in building something meaningful. Yeah, I said. I think she would. The company we built was stronger now, founded not just on technology or business strategy, but on something more fundamental, the understanding that true power comes from combining our strengths rather than fighting over control. As for being sisters, we were working on that too, one day at a time. Some wounds take longer to heal, but they do heal, if you let them. And sometimes, what you build after breaking down is stronger than what was there before.